Quick tip. For those who don't get the context, check my previous uploads. It'll help. Hello guys, 𝗬𝗓𝗧𝗘𝗥𝗦 here. I kept you guys waiting for so long, right? Sorry about that, but like I mentioned multiple times, this idea is quite unintuitive, so I really wanted to make sure that enough of you guys were ready to see this answer as an answer. That's why I published 4 videos in a barrage before uploading this. Anyway, enough rambling, let's get straight to the point. Valve's mediocre updates, TF2 Emporium, the Workshop cartel. My answer to the cause behind all these workshop issues, the workshop voting system, is DTV, Dynamic Threshold Voting. Before talking about DTV, let's speculate how Valve select items to add in-game. The only input they made available to us is like-dislike buttons, right? So, let's say Valve is using like-dislike vote counts and ratios to choose items. But the problem is, according to Goodhart's law, exploits target the like-dislike system. So, from Valve's perspective, high like count plus high like ratio can be a sign of community approval or can be an instigated disingenuous outcome. High like count plus low like ratio can be a polarizing response or can be organized sabotage. Nothing is clear. Unless Valve knows and understands all the context of the TF2 community, the truth is unreachable. Worse, even if Valve finds the truth, it's still impossible to make a fair, ranked list of items due to Arrow's impossibility theorem. And even worse, if Valve only uses like counts and ratios to judge items that are not excellent but still good, decent items lose their chance to join the party. You are already experiencing a severe headache, aren't you? Maybe this is the reason why Valve was silent this whole time. They had to hide their selection process, but they probably couldn't explain their selection process either, because it's likely to be a chaotic mess. And here comes the biggest difference between DTV and the current voting system. DTV removes the need to determine whether a vote is genuine or manipulated, by asking you to write down one more thing: how high should an item's like ratio be to qualify? The threshold. The dynamic threshold. Let's start with this. Here's a simplified example of DTV. There are items named A, B, C. They are the item candidates for this update. There are 100 voters who can vote either like or dislike on each item, and additionally, they must write down a threshold for this vote as a percentage. When all 100 voters finish voting and setting their threshold, those 100 thresholds are gathered and averaged, and the result is used as this vote's final threshold. Let's say the final threshold for this vote is 60%. This means that the voters' collective standards for this vote is an item should receive a like ratio of 60% or higher to qualify. Now let's say the like ratios of items A, B, and C are 80%, 60%, and 40%. If this is the case, items A and B satisfy the threshold so they qualify, but item C doesn't, so it is disqualified from this update. If the ratios are 80%, 70%, and 60%, every item qualifies, but if they are 50%, 40%, and 30%, all 3 items are disqualified. How is this more fair, clear, and exploit resilient, you ask? Let me walk you through this step by step. DTV is fair because there's no advantage or privilege for certain voters or candidates. Everyone gets to vote for their candidates, and everyone's thresholds are averaged together at the end, therefore, no vote is wasted. And with the current method, underqualified items may pass under the radar, but with DTV, they must be judged by the final threshold, so that becomes impossible. Moreover, if there's a notably bad submission among the candidates, people can choose to increase their threshold percentages to make sure that such submission cannot qualify. Yes, DTV gives us form of boycott, in a way. If life gives you only lemons, why do you have to choose between lemons? You should be able to just trash them all, shouldn't you? That's why I think DTB is much more fair than the current method. DTB is also clear as long as Valve chooses to make the data public after the vote, each candidate's like counts and ratios, along with people's threshold data. If there is an issue, a normal voting system cannot provide proper feedback since the dimension of its data is flat. But DTB allows you to further examine what caused what using the threshold data. DTB's exploit resilience also comes from that public data. If people vote naturally, that data should follow a mathematically natural distribution, such as a normal distribution. But if there is manipulation using vote counts or something, it should become distorted, unnaturally. DTB cannot prevent every attack, no system can, but it can at least tell us whether there was an attack through data and math. The more we use DTB, the more fair, clear, and exploit resilient it'll get. That's what I think is the best part of the DTB system. Now here's the main part. How should we apply DTB to the TF2 workshop? Again, I'll go step by step for you guys. This will be unintuitive, yes, but it's not going to be that hard. So, if you're down, let me elaborate. Step 1. Voter eligibility. I know that letting everyone vote sounds nice, but we all know that exploits like mass bot botting will happen. Therefore, we need some form of restriction, no doubt. My suggestion is, well, using playtime alone would let trading bots bot too, so I think a total of over 100 hours of class playtime would be good enough. I know that alt accounts can be a problem, but I can't quite think of a good solution yet. Let me know if there's a better idea. Step 2. Candidate selection. We should leave this entirely to Valve, I think. I mean, TF2 is Valve's game in the first place, so. However, workshop submissions are made by users, so Valve selects candidates, users choose what to add. Seems fair enough. Let them suggest cosmetics, word paints, unusual effects, taunts, maps, everything. If our gut feeling says something is wrong, we can boycott via dynamic threshold anyways. In this way, no one is at a disadvantage, I think. Step 3. Vote categorization. I just briefly mentioned cosmetics, word paints, unusuals, taunts, and maps separately. I did that on purpose because I thought grouping them together in one vote would cause an issue. Like, think about it. We want many good cosmetics, but we want a few good maps. So it would be better to split them by category, so each category can have its own vote and threshold. Step 4. Vote autosave. Now we have the votes for the next update ready and categorized. What we need to do is now enter one category, vote for every candidate, and seal the vote with your threshold percentage. Maybe we should randomize the candidate list per voter to spread the attention weight as much as possible. Anyway, you might stop your voting before finishing for various reasons, right? Therefore, we'll need to autosave your vote, so you can continue later. However, unfinished votes shouldn't count as valid votes, because to make the DTB system run properly, submitting a threshold is non-negotiable for voters. Step 5. Unlimited revision until the deadline. In real-life voting, you vote once and that's it. But we're in a digital world, and considering that massive drama can always happen in the community, it'd be logical to let people change their vote details as much as they want as long as it's before the deadline. But I'd like to add this restriction. You can change your threshold anytime, but you can access each candidate only through randomized access. Not pure randomness, but fair, controlled randomness. Because I think if you let people access each candidate freely, organized manipulation such as instigation would get much easier for that elusive cartel. I would propose the power of two choices method. Choose two random candidates and show whichever has been shown less often. I think this would be fair enough, random enough. Step 6. Veiled, so dynamic threshold. One of the most important parts of DTB is this. Like-dislike ratios and threshold should be veiled until the deadline. If they are open, peer pressure would distort people's choices, so they must be veiled. And because they are veiled, they would provoke a ton of debates in the community, speculating about the current threshold, whether we should pull it up or push it down, that sort of thing. And this is just my speculation, but I don't think these debates would be toxic. If you act toxic, people would turn against you and do the polar opposite of what you want, so. If you want to make people agree with you under DTB, you must be polite and logical. So I think this veil has the potential to cultivate a healthy culture of debate in the community. Veiled, so make us debate, therefore dynamic threshold. Step 7. End of the vote, prepare for the next vote. When the deadline arrives, like-dislike ratios and thresholds get revealed, and according to those, the contents of the update are sealed. Those with like ratios at or over the threshold get added, and those below the threshold are dropped from the update. They may be chosen by Valve again next time, but that's a story for later. When the vote ends, and hopefully Valve releases the data, especially how the threshold moved over time and in response of the events, the data will help us make wiser choices next time. Votes make data, data makes us wiser, wiser voters vote again, a cycle. Not vicious, virtuous. A virtuous cycle. That's it. That was my answer to the workshop voting system, DTB. And like I said, this is quite unintuitive, so you may have some questions. So let's address some obvious ones before finishing this video, shall we? Question 1. What if voters are disingenuous and submit their threshold in a strategic manner? Under DTB, that's a fair play, a natural strategy. I mean, does everyone vote with their heart in every real-life vote? Nonsense, right? I know what you're worried about. Extremists. Them ruining the entire vote. No? If so, don't worry. Under DTB, as long as extremists on both ends are similar in size, the casting vote will be in hands of the people in the middle ground, the people with reason. Question 2. What if a cartel tries to manipulate like ratios and thresholds? It's definitely possible. Though DTB has made manipulating votes harder than the current method, it still hasn't made it impossible. Therefore, if a cartel, a cabal, successfully managed to gather enough people behind the scenes, manipulation is possible even under the DTB system. However, if a cartel is notably small compared with the number of normal voters, their manipulation attempt cannot make a huge difference. No big deal. Then, what if a cartel gets huge enough to meaningfully distort the vote itself? If this is the case, the cartel would be forced to reveal itself by its own weight, so we'll be able to spot them. Then, now we have a visible league of villains in our sight, so we can fight, legitimately. With, like, aforementioned threshold boycott or something. We, normal people, heroes, want to make sure people can compete fairly, right? Question 3. What if the majority of the community is already a cartel? What can I do then? If the majority agrees on something, isn't that just public opinion? If this is the case, you, the minority trying to push your ideas through, can be seen as a cartel from the majority's point of view. If you're sure that you're not a cartel but think that the majority is wrong, try to persuade them, logically. If you're right, people will agree with you, and things may eventually change. Anyway, that's all. That was, so far, my best explanation of DTB, Dynamic Threshold Voting, the solution I devised for the workshop issues. Some may be satisfied, some may have doubts, some may be mad. However, would you kindly to think deeply about this to see if DTB is plausible or not? I may be wrong, so. And if, just if, you think DTB has potential, let's come together and ask Valve, ask them to implement DTB in the workshop voting system. For me alone, it's not possible. I need you guys for this. We had to do a Save TF2 movement just to get that one infamous tweet, and to make Fix TF2 work, we had to gather over 300k signatures. So I'm not quite sure how many of us it'll take for Improve TF2 to work. Yep, for now, DTB exists only as an idea. Plausible, but that's it. An idea that may be forgotten, gone, if you guys choose to ignore it. I might, though I don't know how, try to make a DTB simulation website to test out and bring you guys more data to consider, but in the end, it all depends on your will. If you want my DTB to be implemented in the TF2 Workshop, if you want to make this flow actually flow, join my Discord, let's have a talk. I have many other ideas for improved TF2 too, so. Anyway, thanks for bearing with my ramblings. Give it some thought, and if there's any questions or ideas, feel free to DM me on Discord. Dewill_. This is my Discord handle. My DM is always open because you never know when someone who needs my help shows up or someone who wants to help me shows up. Alright, that's it for today's video, I guess. I'll see you around. Have a good one, guys. This was Monoral, 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏, signing off.